Oh, hi everyone. My name is Oscar. I work in the responsible AI team at Google. I'm based in Sydney. I met Anki a while ago at a different GDG event. I really like Anki. He's a great guy, and he spoke amazing guys about the community here. And we've been trying to find some opportunity to work together since then. It's been almost 2 years, I think, since we had a conversation, but I'm glad to finally be here. Again, just an absolute pleasure to be speaking to you. So I'm here today to speak about the amazing powers of open models. Of course, we'll be talking about responsible AI as well, but the main topic is going to be open models. So it is unquestionable that the AI revolution is here. Some of us are more aware than others, but the metaphorical cat is now out of the bag. AI has come basically like a wrecking ball and is going across all kinds of industries and ideas and concepts, and it is here to stay. And it has been just an amazing transformation. We've really crossed that threshold over the last couple of years, where AI has gone from being this niche thing that worked very, very well for some niche topics, and to now being basically a general purpose tool that it is prevalent across, like I said, basically every industry. So we're seeing AI in essentially everyday life. You have AI in your pocket, but you also have personalized experiences in all kinds of devices, from your laptops, computers, again, your pocket. We also have AI-powered recommendations online. If you use any kind of streaming service like Netflix, Disney+, all those are using AI-powered recommendations. If you look at it from a certain angle, even Google itself, Google Ads, the biggest moneymaker for Google, it is just probably the world's biggest AI-powered recommendation engine, trying to recommend what is the next thing you should be clicking. We're also seeing AI going not just big, but small. We're seeing AI-powered appliances. From the typical joke, which is we're going to see AI in your toasters, which is actually going to happen. We're seeing AI in washing machines. We're even seeing AI in vacuum cleaners, right? So the vacuum cleaners have been for a long time talking about how smart they were. They've been talking the talk for many years. Well, they're finally going to walk the walk, or roll the roll, or whatever they do. So to reiterate, AI is going to transform basically every industry. Like a wrecking ball. And just to name a few examples here, we're seeing AI in healthcare. For instance, AI is able to perform the role of medical advice. Google released MedPalm a while ago. It is an LLM based on the Palm family of models, and it is able to pass several different medical bar exams. It's quite impressive results. Finance, well, we're seeing an extreme level of sophistication in the finance field and fintech in the use of AI. Education, we just heard a second ago about some of those ideas, how we have AI-powered tutoring, right? I wish I had that as a student. And then finally, something that should be hitting pretty close to home for us, and that is software. We're going to see, and we are already seeing AI making great progress in affecting the industry of software. To give you a more concrete example here, and the most recent quarterly earnings report by Google, the CEO said that 1/4 of all new code at Google is generated by AI. As a user of some of these tools, I can attest that is absolutely 100% true. We use our internal version of what I guess would be the equivalent of Copilot. I don't know if you know about Copilot for VS Code. And what happens is that because Google has a very unique way of doing code, where we have a big monorepo and we use our own libraries and we have our own very strict style guides, we can actually fine-tune some of these models in a way that works very, very well for us. So actually, whatever you see on the outside world, open source in Copilot, imagine that, but with 10x improvement put into it, because it works very well for our specific use case. All of this is possible thanks to the rise of what are called foundation models. They are the metaphorical engine of the AI revolution. Foundation models are known for being multitask and in some cases multi-domain. What I mean by multitask is that previously AI was very narrow purpose. You have an AI that is able to beat the chess world champion. It's been a long time, but that was the origins of AI. Nowadays, we have AI that is able to apply from a single model to many different tasks, and that's what makes it a foundation model. Most of the use cases we see today are text-to-text, so that's not necessarily multi-domain, but we're seeing an ever-increasing need and uses for multi-modality, multiple domains, such as text-to-video, video-to-text, and so forth, so different types of data. But speaking of data, foundation models are extremely data hungry. We require an ever-increasing amount of data to be able to train these models. That's just a fundamental part. So that is a perfect segue to data. So if foundation models are the engine of the AI revolution, data is the equivalent of fuel. Again, we absolutely need the data to have these models. You can have the world's most sophisticated model architecture. If you don't have the data to train it, then it's not going to work, right? So data plays an absolutely crucial role in the AI revolution. Arguably, the data explosion happened before the AI revolution. What happened is that we had an ever-increasing amount of data being produced from many different sources, and that empowered us to think big. And now we have all this data. Well, that actually opens the door for these other kind of models that we just couldn't even think about before. We are seeing an unprecedented level of data creation, and that data, again, comes from many different sources. Some of it is user-generated data, and some of it is environmental data. When I say user data, I don't mean necessarily, you writing a blog post and publishing it online, or you writing a post on Reddit, Twitter, X, Facebook, whatever your drug of choice is. But actually, anything that you do that can be measured can be used for training some of these models, and it counts as user-generated data. Think of, for example, whenever you're walking into the store, there are cameras everywhere, right? And they can see where you're going and where are you stopping and what are you looking at. All these self-checkout machines, they all have plenty of cameras and sensors, right? That's all user-generated data that can be used to improve a lot of these models. Then, of course, we have the environmental data. We have sensors everywhere. We have telescopes looking at the space. That is an overwhelming amount of data. We actually have far more data than we have the ability to train models with. To give you an example of the scale of data that we're talking about, I'm going to use an intentionally old example, and I'll let your imagination think about, okay, if this was the case almost 10 years ago, where do you think we are today? As of 2015, YouTube CEO, Susan Wojcicki, said that over 400 hours of video are uploaded to YouTube every single minute. That is staggering. And if you think about video, that is the richest possible data source that there is, because you have a collection of image frames, right? Each image is a whole bunch of pixels. You also have audio that goes with it. That audio can also be used to train some of the audio-based models. And then you can actually transcribe the audio into words. A lot of those videos are people speaking. You can transcribe that audio into words, and then you have a whole bunch of text. So this is actually one of the most dense and rich sources of data that we have for training the new generation of AI models. But of course, not all data is created equal. The quality matters. As the saying in the industry goes, garbage in, garbage out. You need to have clean and accurate data. It's absolutely essential to be able to train a good model. But it's not just about a model that performs well. It is also about having a model that is responsible and that it does not propagate harmful biases. So you need to have representative data. This is purely a statistical concept. There's a concept in statistics called out-of-distribution sampling. If an AI model has not been trained using a specific kind of data, it can only do as good as any human would, which is guessing. Imagine that we have an AI model that is trained on cuisines all around the world. We know what the local produce is, we know what the local people do, we know what the local animals are, and it's trained on cuisines all around the world except for Australia. And then we asked the AI, okay, what do people in Australia eat? They'll probably say, I don't know, kangaroos, cane toads, right? We don't know, because it has not been trained with that. So it can only guess. So it is very important to understand that the AI does not have superpowers. It is amazing and feels like magic, but it is not magic. We have training data that is representative to be able to have a well-performing and unbiased model. So just to reiterate, we need access to high-quality data. And that also comes with the other side of the coin. There are some data that is intentionally or unintentionally misleading or plain wrong that can also affect the outcome and how bad or good the model is on the other end. So from looking from a different angle, different types of data. The data that I want to bring to your attention now is open data. By that, I mean data that is freely available for everyone to use. That is a big part of AI innovation. This accelerates AI research because it evens the playing field. It democratizes access to this very much needed fuel to build AI, and it promotes collaboration. And I'll make the case a little bit later, but it is very important for us to fight for and maintain access to open data. And to give you not so good a statistic, there was a recent report, I think this was actually reported by New York Times as well, that there is a rapid decline in access to freely available data for use for AI training. So you're seeing all kinds of websites and platforms that are explicitly forbidden using their data for AI training. Now this, on the surface, it makes sense. I'm trying to put myself in the shoes of the data creator. Okay, so say that, imagine that I have a blog, and I've been writing my blog for 10 years. And then here comes Google or Meta or OpenAI, and they train their AI on my blog, and they are monetizing their AI. Well, I should be entitled to some of that, right? That makes perfect sense. That's a perfectly logical argument. You can even be one step further. So I'm a platform, and I've worked very hard to maintain my users and my community, and people are contributing to the platform. And then here comes some of these companies, and they train some of their big models, and they are monetizing their models. Well, I should be entitled to a piece of that, right? Or the same for journalism and so on and so forth. But if you see this all across the board, and say we go down that route, and we actually have to pay for access to a lot of this data that humans can access for free, but to train AI models, you have to pay. For the big players like Google and Meta and OpenAI and so forth, it adds a few, maybe a couple million, say a few million to the training costs. They can easily absorb that. They're not going to be affected, and the people that are producing the data are going to be able to monetize it. Everyone is happy, right? Yes, but where does that put the rest of us? And I'm saying now us from the perspective of an engineer and somebody that loves open source at its core. I am now locked out of the game. It is now a pay-to-play game, right? If every piece of data costs money, only those that have money can afford to play the game. I'm not so sure that that's the future that I want to live in. So that's another great segue to closed models. So before I talk about open models, let's talk about closed models to see what the differences are. Undoubtedly, closed models are the current AI leaders. And by that, I mean that they perform the best. And they have been trained with the most amount of data, and they have the most money behind them. So they have unmatched performance. They perform at what is called state-of-the-art. That's a scientific term that just means best in the world. There's never been anything recorded that has outperformed in a specific metric. Some of the metrics that have recently been beaten by closed models are language understanding, image editing and generation, or even writing code, like we mentioned earlier. We have amazing tools in industry that are kept private, like the ones we mentioned at Google, but also things like Copilot, right? So we have some unbelievably good performance coming out of these closed models. I don't need to handhold you through this, but AI is being used pervasively across almost every user-facing product that you see at Google. And that is a good thing, and it makes the products much better for it. Again, the performance is just that much better thanks to AI. But of course, there are some trade-offs. The thing with closed models is that they are essentially a black box, and that presents this dilemma. Yeah, it works great until it doesn't. And when it doesn't work great, how do you know what failed? How do you know how to fix it? Well, you simply can't. You use it or lose it, so to speak. The inner workings of these models are completely hidden. You pass in some inputs and you get the outputs. And if it works, great, and if it doesn't, well, tough luck. So you have some limited understanding. It also plays the role of trust, because you have to put trust into these models from different perspectives. Number one, you have to trust that the model is going to work and do what it's supposed to do. But number two, you have to trust that the model was trained using whatever the company told you they were using, right? Or you can have to put some trust in the sense that this model is doing everything by the book, according to whatever jurisdiction you happen to be working in, right? That's a lot of complexity and a lot of trust you have to put in some of these models that you simply cannot inspect, and you have to take the word of whoever is giving you these models. And that includes Google, of course. And that brings us to open models. The whole idea of open models is to democratize AI in the same way that open source democratize access to code. I see a lot of parallels between open models and open source, and I'll mention a few of those in just a minute. So first, let me describe very briefly the power of openness. So when we have open models, we can truly unlock the potential of AI, because we can understand and adapt and freely share these AI models with whoever we choose. I mean, fair, there are some weird licenses out there, but by and large, the majority of open models are extremely permissive, and we can do whatever we want with them and share in whatever way we like. They are, just by virtue of being open, more inclusive and collaborative. There's no wall you have to hop through. There's no bar you have to clear. If it's available, it's fair game. You can just go ahead and access it. And also, by, again, virtue of being open, it is more trustworthy. Why? Because it doesn't require trust. You can go and just look, what happened? Or how does the model work? When I get certain output that doesn't look quite right, I can actually go and peek under the hood. You may not have the ability to do that in terms of your skill set, but if you put the time and effort, you absolutely can go down that path. That means that these models are very viable, and that is a big deal. So just like closed models are fueling innovation and they are the tip of the spear when it comes to performance, open models are fueling innovation in a different way. It's a different kind of innovation. They allow for some grassroots experimental approach. The reason being, again, we can all play in this sandbox. It's free for all. It's able to address niche needs and social causes. In a lot of cases, these closed models, because they cost so much time, effort, and money to produce, there is an extreme pressure to monetize them. Whereas with open models, same as open source software, you can build a very niche specific software for your particular industry that happens to scratch a very specific social cost that is important to you, and that's totally okay. And that is the perfect place for the use of open models. For the same reason, we've seen rapid adoption for very specific niche applications in open models. Again, you can scratch your itch, whereas that will be much more difficult to do with closed models. Open models foster collaboration because they are, once again, open to everyone. You can invite your friends to the sandbox as well. That allows us to do a lot of knowledge sharing and to build on each other's work. Whereas when you have a closed model, you can take some inspiration from it, but you cannot build upon it. And one thing that I think is very crucial as well is that the more people that contribute to these models and to these ecosystems, the more diverse set of backgrounds and skills and so forth, that's going to lead to stronger outcomes, because these models are actually going to be for everyone, by everyone. A small tidbit of information here that we recently released. Who's familiar with the Gemma family of models? Get a few hands, perfect. So we released Gemma 1 earlier this year, I think it was around February, and it had over 10 million downloads by the time we released Gemma 2 6 months later. And I was checking just last week, I guess it was this week, and we had 10 million downloads for Gemma 2 this month alone. So we're seeing a staggering amount of people that use Gemma models, and that's one of the many open models in the field of text-to-text. There's a whole universe of open models out there. People are using them, and it works for them, and that's fantastic. Open models address some very broad set of challenges, but they have some challenges of their own as well. Some of the problems that you may encounter in open models is that it is difficult to ensure quality. You don't have a big company with a big pile of money that can ensure that the model has perfect or great performance at the end of the day. It is also much harder to prevent misuse. When you use an API like Gemini, Google is going to tell you what is and is not allowed to use as per their terms of service. Whereas with an open model, it's free for all. If you want to misuse it, well, that is on you. But that is a challenge because some of these models have some immense amount of power. Another big challenge is that, again, because of the giant cost of training these open models, it is very difficult to maintain a stable source of funding, and in many cases, they're not sustainable. That is, in my opinion, still an open problem that we have not fully fixed yet. Now let me describe a few specific examples of how we've seen open models being used. Because again, open models are having some real world impact. And hopefully I'm going to encourage you to use more open models towards the end of this talk. And what I want to highlight is that they may not be the best at what they do for some very specific performance benchmarks, but for a very large number of cases, it is good enough. And when it comes to getting things done, good enough is most of the time all you need. So for small and medium-sized enterprises, it really levels the playing field. And you can think of this from the perspective of supply chain. If you are to use a closed model, and then tomorrow you lose access to that closed model, or the closed model gets updated and suddenly does not perform as well as you thought it did, then what do? You're shit out of luck, right? Whereas if you use an open model, you control your update cycle and you control when you want to move from that model to something else. And once you've downloaded the model, it is yours to keep, right? But that's all, that may lead to other problems. Now you are in the business of providing infrastructure for these giant models. There are some ways, though, that you can have your cake and eat it too. You have plenty of companies out there that have sprung up. It's this whole cottage industry, and all they're doing is providing an API service for these open models. So you can actually have these open models, have somebody else host them, but they are completely interchangeable. There's truly infrastructure as a service, but you can keep the stability of an open model. And again, we're seeing all the big players are in it, but a number of small players that happen to have enough resources. And I've tried a lot of these myself, and they work very well. We already talked about education. We talked about the AI-assisted tutoring, and I want to mention a specific example very close to me. Google.org organizes every year an AI Impact Challenge. I think it slightly changes names every year. Last year it was called the AI Impact Challenge. If you are in the nonprofit space, applications are open for next year. So as part of that program, I mentored one of the nonprofits called ID Insight. And ID Insight built a product called Ask a Question. And what they were doing is to help other nonprofits, other organizations. In this case, it was called Mom Connect. And they were helping new unexpected mothers in India to answer questions about maternity. Even things like, can I feed water to my baby, for example? I don't even know the answer to that question, right? So they had an AI-powered chatbot that sourced from a trustworthy bank of Q&A, and they could match the user question to the specific bank. And if it didn't match one of the specific answers, it will fall back to human. And they were able to service think it's a population of 5 million users with just 3 actual humans on the other end of the chat. And they do that with the power of AI, and they're able to answer all these amazing questions that relate to health. And this is about educating people, right? So we're seeing AI making great inroads, not just the field of education in itself, but also in just educating others in specific outcomes, in this case, in population health. We're also seeing an amazing amount of reach when it comes to research. All this chart that I pulled, I think it was yesterday, 2 days ago, these are all the papers on arXiv that mention only open models. So I've actually subtracted the papers that mention any form of closed models, such as Gemini or GPT-4 or Claude or any of those. And these are the papers that only mention open models in the abstract. Now, what does this mean? This means that all of these papers I can reproduce. As long as I have the compute resources, I can actually verify, essentially bit for bit, what their outputs were. That is amazing progress when it comes to science. We are in the midst of what is called a reproducibility crisis. It is becoming increasingly difficult to reproduce other people's papers. By focusing on open models, we can actually nip that right in the bud, and we can ensure that whatever we do, others can replicate. In the area of social good, I don't have to convince you too hard of this. There are many examples, and all these big companies will be very eager to tell you how amazing what they're doing in this field. One example would be in environmental protection. Google actually partnered with Xyrom, and they built a product called FireSat. And FireSat uses what is called a geospatial foundation model. So we all know about text-to-text models. Well, imagine what that is like, but on the field of geospatial data. Pretty difficult to wrap your head around that, but what they do is able to detect where fires are starting in a specific small grid up to 5 meters. And then this can be used later on to do some modeling and trying to predict where those fires are going to spread. And that is being actively used between Google, Xyrom, and the government of Australia to hopefully help during bushfire season. And then finally, I want to call out creative industries. This is something that's been amazing to watch from the sidelines. I cannot claim to be part of this, but it is a flourishing community, and the one that I'm particularly impressed by are the text-to-image models. And this has empowered a lot of people to have this new form of artistic expression. And there's a lot of pushback on the world of art against AI. I'm not here to start any of those debates, but I can tell you that when what is the expression? When the tide rises, it floats all the boats, right? So we are seeing a lot of extremely talented, amazing people building some truly cool, beautiful things. And as somebody that has a relatively deep understanding of how some of these text-to-image diffusion-based models work, I am not able to build anything half as cool and good as somebody who has an art background and is using the very same models, and they have only a very basic understanding of the models. So I think that it is just raising the bar for how simple it is to create beautiful things, but people that have that art component to their background are still able to do much better things. And to give you another specific example, all of these slides that you see in between sections, like this one, all these are AI generated, right? And that's completely okay. I was never going to hire an artist to create this in between slides, right? It's just good enough. Again, on the theme of just being good enough. So this has just empowered me to be able to have what I think are more beautiful slides compared to just boring white background. And switching topics a little bit, we are here about responsible AI, and I'll be remiss not to speak about responsible AI, considering that that is my main field of work. It is a shared imperative, and that is also true for closed models, but is especially important for open models. First, transparency. Because we can shine the light on AI and we can poke under the hood and bring our flashlight to it. That's the beauty of open models. They are verifiable, they are transparent, just by the virtue of being open. Then we have data governance. It is very important to make sure that we protect the data and that we only use sources of data that are appropriate for these models. That doesn't mean just licensing, which is also very important, but again, using good, truthful data and ensuring that we weed out harmful biases. Very important as well to ensure privacy protection. In a lot of cases, a lot of the data online, it exists, it just shouldn't be used because it's a lot of personally identifiable information. Just because it's online doesn't mean that you should be using it. Next, I want to talk about fairness. This bleeds a little bit from the previous topic, and that is that we need to ensure that we build fair AI. But this is actually one of my main topics of work right now. It is in measuring and mitigating, if possible, some of these bias. And this is a very nuanced, complex topic. You have to do things like, first, how do you define bias? It can be done in many different dimensions, and it totally depends on the specific subtopic that you're discussing. So this is not just marketing speak, but it's actually a very deeply technical engineering subdiscipline that has a lot of work put into it, and it is still very early days, so we're all learning as we go. The final goal is to ensure that we have equitable outcomes and that these AIs don't produce output that it is propagating harmful biases. And then finally, accountability. It is very important for us to ensure that we can take responsibility. This is number one for societal impacts, because this AI is being used across many industries everywhere by everyone. But we also need to promote governance frameworks and ethical guidelines that are applied across the industry. And there's a lot of talk about AI regulation. I'm not going to open that kind of worms, but I'll tell you that whenever I hear AI regulation, to me, it's like somebody saying that they want to regulate math. We are missing the context. We are missing the application, right? I want to talk specifics. But beyond that, we as an industry don't need to wait for regulation. We can ourselves decide who needs to be held accountable and what are our ethical guidelines. And there is a whole bunch of organizations out there that you can contribute and participate and be part of that can help raise that bar. And at the end of the day, it is on all of us, right? The regulation is going to be the bare minimum, but we as an industry need to be the ones deciding and lifting the bar for what we think are appropriate ethical uses of AI. And then for the final section, I talked about what closed models are, talked about open models, talked about open data. What can you do to help support these open models? Hopefully I'm starting to convince you why open models are worth at least giving them a try. So what can you do on that area? Well, you can join plenty of communities. We have a thriving ecosystem of open models, and this is just a few examples. But when it comes to the ones that I'm familiar with as an engineer, we have several organizations that are gathering an amazing community. And because this is open stuff, right, everyone is able and welcome to participate. It is a wonderful thing, and we are at the very early stages. This is a very exciting time to be part of the AI community. And I am very happy to be riding this wave. I encourage you all to participate in all these communities as well, because again, diversity brings strength. Education, and I don't mean how AI can be used to education, I mean educating about AI. We should be thinking about upskilling. Being able to understand and use AI, at least at the superficial level, is going to be as important as being computer literate is today. And you still see a lot of computer illiterate people, and you can see how difficult it is for them to get a leg up in today's world. I heard somebody saying this the other day. I can't remember who said this, but I cannot take credit. And the quote was, AI is not going to replace radiologists. Radiologists who use AI are going to replace radiologists who don't. We need to see AI as a tool, and we need to learn how to use it, and we need to encourage each other and our communities to leverage it for good and to do that education component. When you think about future generations as well, again, you wouldn't let your kids not know how to type on a keyboard, right? It's crucial for today's world. You need to learn how to use AI to be an active participant in tomorrow's economy. Back to ethical guidelines. Again, this is in all of us as an industry, but you don't have to start from scratch. There are plenty of very smart groups of people that have thought about this for a very long time. A few that I want to call out, the NIST in the US released what is called the AI Risk Management Framework. It's actually a small ebook that I highly recommend reading. The EU has a system called Altai, where you can actually go and do a self-assessment of how responsible your AI application is. Cyro, as per usual, punching above their weight. They have what is called the Responsible AI Pattern Catalog. And then, of course, Google, we have what is called the AI Principles. They are relatively basic compared to the other three, but the idea is to have that component of let's educate others about what ethical AI and good AI should be like. These are just a few examples. There are many others. These are just my personal set of favorites. The bottom line is, once again, building tomorrow's ethical AI is not going to be the government's job. It's our job. And then, once again, open data. I already mentioned to you why I think open data is important and why I think that having a pay-to-play system only benefits the big players. And I want to protect that open ecosystem. And I want to draw the analogy with open source. I think that's our next right here. Yeah, I want to drive the analogy with open source. In the world of software, open source makes no logical sense. There is just no incentives from a business standpoint, from an engineering standpoint. Open source shouldn't exist, and yet it does, and it leads the industry actually. And that has happened through a continuous battle. It has been always fighting as an industry for open source, and it is about choosing, preferentially choosing working on projects that are going to be open source as opposed to closed source. Right? As an engineer, in many cases, I'm able to participate in that conversation and to make the business case why open source is good. But again, it doesn't really make much sense. It's just purely a preferential thing, because if you follow that train of thought, you probably don't want to live in the world where every piece of software is closed source. We will all be worse off. So I think the same about both open data and open models. As an industry, it's going to be a fight. We're going to have to continue to fight that fight. And we have to acknowledge and understand the importance of having access that is open for everyone and not just for the big players. So I'll leave you with that. I want to encourage you all to try open models and to fight the fight for open data. And hopefully some of you today will start thinking about using open models for your really amazing and cool AI applications. Thank you, everyone.
Benjamin, did you want to come and start getting ready for the next one? Thank you. So, Oscar, I have a question. What are the requirements to get into this open source model world? Like, do you need a $10,000 computer with 8 GPUs, or how does that work? Like, what are the barriers to entry here, or how easy is it to get into that world?
Yeah, great question. So it totally depends on what level of involvement you want and what your actual use case is. As I mentioned when I talked about the small and medium-sized businesses, you can absolutely get started with just using an API, and the cost is equivalent or even lower than using closed source models. Now, if you want to get into the business of developing some of these open models, there are plenty of crowdsource opportunities. There's people that are helping curate these data sets. There's actually, in the field of responsible AI, a huge need for more data sets. It's actually a very surprisingly rudimentary state of affairs where we have a handful of data sets that are being used to benchmark whether model A is more responsible than model B. This is prime for disruption. I really hope that the community here steps up and helps define what responsible AI is, because I would like for that to be coming from the ecosystem. I don't want to be Google or Meta or OpenAI or some government say, this is responsible and we should all be doing this. No, I want this to be coming from all of us. So that's one good way to become involved as well if you want to be on the production side of the models.
Great, thank you so much, Oscar. It was a great talk. Really, really enjoyed it. If there's one thing that you can take that you want people to take away from this talk, what would that be? One message.
One message is give open models a try. And a lot of people go for the low-hanging fruit and go like, oh, well, it's just very easy to get, an API key for so-and-so service, and I'm just going to use this, and it works. And that's great. But if we consciously make the decision for open models in the same way that we make that decision for open source software, I think that's going to lead to better outcomes in the future. And in many cases, we can have our cake and eat it too. Many of the open models are one API key away as well. So definitely give them a try.
Great, thank you so much, everybody. Give Oscar a big hand.